It is time, Michael, to talk some blue chip and red chip quarterbacks. But before we get into the list, and this list, unlike the others, we have them ranked going from 10 all the way up to number 1.
Yeah.
But first, let's define and set the criteria, because that's what we like to do here before we get into these positions. What separates a red chip and blue chip quarterback from the rest of the signal callers from around the league?
Hey, well, look, it really is. Who's the red chips are the guys that aren't quite in the top 5. I mean, blue chip are top 5 players, right? And so they're the top 5 players at their position, and red chips should be the 6 through 10. And so that's kind of separates them. The criteria is simply this. Like, you go to a game and you know this other guy is going to throw the ball. Can he beat you throwing the football? And can he make all the throws on the field? Is he dead-like accurate? We talked about this before. There's 3 kinds of accuracy. Throw it through the door, hit the doorknob, or throw it through the keyhole. These guys all need to throw it through the keyhole. To be in a blue chip, red chip category, you got to throw the ball through the keyhole. You got to make plays on your own. You've got to be able to make a play that the system didn't give you. You got to protect the ball, right? People say, Kirk Cousins on the list. How could he be on the list? Well, he throws 33 touchdown passes, only 7 interceptions. Okay? And you also have to they have to evaluate the season that they had in totality. For example, Kyler Murray didn't make the list, right? You could say, well, he had a really good year. He had 24 touchdown passes, 10 interceptions. Well, do you watch the second half of the season? The main criteria of my list is, can the defense take them out of the game by the way they rush? That's really critical. Can they take him out of the game by the way they rush? You can take Murray out of the game if you rush in front of him. If you stand in front of him, make him have to throw. You could take Brady if you get in the paint. It's harder to do. It's difference between getting in front of Murray and getting in the paint on Brady. 2 different things. So for me, if these guys have to play left-handed, can they make plays? And I think ultimately that's how I came up with the list.
All right. Well, I mean, let's get into the list, because I have some questions about these guys that you left off the list.
Fire away, Femi. Argue with me. God damn it, argue.
I'm ready to argue with you, but I want to get to the list first, because the people are waiting to see what this list is, 10 through 6. And you hinted at it. Kirk Cousins is on the list, and that's where it starts as the number 10 quarterback for the Red Chips here. Kirk Cousins of the Minnesota Vikings. Number 9 is Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys. Number 8, Derek Carr of the Las Vegas Raiders. Number 7, Matthew Stafford of the LA Rams, coming off a Super Bowl victory. And number 6 is Joe Burrow, everybody's favorite quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, entering into his 3rd season here. But to me, when I looked at this list, Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, Stafford before last year, you could throw him into this category as well. And I get what you're saying, but these are guys that also, in my opinion, don't really elevate the guys around them, because they put up the stats, they have the production, but they also don't have the wins. Kirk Cousins is a 500 quarterback. Derek Carr, below 500, 57-70 in his career, 0-1 in the playoffs. Do you see the elevation from those guys versus some of the guys that you left off the list, like a Russell Wilson, who for a decade won as many games as anybody outside of Tom Brady?
Well, I mean, for Wilson's case, I thought he played bad last year. Then is then, now is now. So, to me, Wilson would have been on the list in years prior, but last year I thought he wasn't very good at all. Thought he turned the ball over. I've mentioned this many times before. Doesn't run with the ball, only 183 yards. Look, I do think quarterbacks have to be a little bit like starting pitchers. Like, you take Joe Burrow, for example, right? I have him 6 on the list. I don't think he played great in the playoffs. The Bengals won and got to the Super Bowl because of Burrow's ability to protect the football, his ability to execute, but he didn't play well. He didn't play at an elite level. And so they won with defense, turning the ball over, protecting the ball, and the kicker. They didn't really win, but he contributed to not losing, Joe Burrow. So for me, playing quarterbacks like the starting pitcher, it's not Kirk Cousins' fault that the Minnesota Vikings defense was so bad. I mean, there's really nothing he could do about it, right? They were as bad as you could possibly be. To me, Derek Carr, when you look at where he was last year through all the changes and how many yards he threw for and his ability to throw the ball with pinpoint-like accuracy, 4,800 yards, Femi, is remarkable, and his ability to complete passes. Now, I wish Carr had more touchdown passes. He had 23 touchdown passes to 14 interceptions. I think that's one of the areas he needs to improve on. But the whole Raider team, their red zone package last year was a disaster, was a complete disaster. So, I think ultimately that comes back. I don't think a quarterback – look, there's guys in the Hall of Fame that didn't win. Warren Moon didn't win. I mean, he only played in one conference championship game. Sometimes we put so much on the quarterback. I mean, was it Josh Allen's fault that Buffalo lost to Kansas City? I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so, right?
No.
You know, and so I think you have to be real. Like, to me, Matthew Stafford, I don't think Matthew Stafford's ever going to be a blue chip player because Matthew Stafford's going to take too many risks with the ball. He is going to turn the ball over, right? And it wasn't his fault for his inability to make for his inability how bad Detroit was. Like, I think it was more Detroit's front office and their execution of player personnel than it was Matthew Stafford not being a winner. I really do. And I think sometimes you got to look at that. You got to look at the whole thing as you go through it. And I think fourth quarter comebacks, game-winning drives, I think all those things matter. I think that, you know, Derek Carr had 6 game-winning drives last year. 6. I mean, how does he not be a top 10 quarterback when you have 6 game-winning drives and 3 fourth quarter comebacks? That's what I'm looking for. I want somebody that does that. Justin Herbert, we'll get to him later. You know, he had 5 fourth quarter comebacks and 5 game-winning drives. You know, Josh Allen, for as great as Josh Allen was last year, didn't have either. Had no fourth quarter comebacks and no game-winning drives. Now, that doesn't keep him out of the list, right? But Russell Wilson had 0 fourth quarter comebacks and he had 1 game-winning drive. Lamar, I didn't put Lamar on this list because Lamar was hurt last year, but if Lamar had 4 game-winning comebacks, fourth quarter comebacks, and 4 game-winning drives, and if he throws the ball in the flat right to the kid, the tight end, I forget who it was, against Pittsburgh, that's going to be 5 and 5 on the 2-point play. Remember that play?
Yeah, I do remember that when they decided to go for 2 there when they had their whole secondary banged up. Yeah.
So, like, to me, that's why. And I get your point about wins. I'm a big believer the quarterback's got to win the game. But sometimes the quarterback can't overcome, A, bad coaching, Sean McDermott in the playoff game, B, bad defense, Mike Zimmer last year, right? You can't overcome that.
Yeah, I think Lamar and Wilson are the ones I particularly would have if somebody were to ask me, Femi, what's your list here? This is Michael's list. This is not my list, but we're breaking it down. Lamar, with his resume and his sample size, and I get that he's not the quarterback who throws for the 4,000 yards. He probably would have last year if he stayed healthy all throughout last year, and that's one of the reasons why you left him off the list there. But Lamar with the
that's the only
record,
reason.
Yeah, that's the only reason. Yeah, because his resume speaks for itself.
He would replace. To me, he's a red chip player. Like, to me, I would easily say Lamar's a red chip player. He just wasn't a red chip player last year because he missed games, you know, and that injury affected him. And he didn't play to the level that he did. Like, his yards per attempt went down. I think Baltimore needs to do a better job offensively. I think they handicap Lamar more than they help him with their RPO game. I think they need to be under center. I've said this be under center. Get him on bootlegs. Get him on nakeds. I mean, the guy is, for lack of a better term, a winner. Do you know there was only 2 quarterbacks last year that did not have a game-winning drive or a fourth quarter comeback?
Wow, I didn't know that.
2. There was only 2. Carson Wentz and Josh Allen.
Wow. I guess the Bills, when they won their games, they oftentimes steamrolled people.
They rolled them. Because, look, but that goes back to what we said in the A block, right? They didn't play anybody. They didn't play great quarterbacks. And when they did, they lost. So, like, I know this hype for Buffalo's going crazy, and I respect Buffalo, and I like Buffalo. But I think we're going way too far out there. I don't think people are peeling back the numbers.
The 5 guys you have on this list here, Joe Burrow, Matthew Stafford, those guys were first-round picks. Derek Carr, second-round pick. Dak Prescott, a fourth-round pick. Same with Kirk Cousins. I want to focus in on Dak because I think it's a big year for him to show that he is maybe a red chip or possibly could potentially vie for being a blue chip, because now the parts are being stripped down on that Cowboys offense. The offensive line is banged up. Amari Cooper's in Cleveland. Michael Gallup is coming off of the ACL injury. They're really putting the onus on Dak Prescott to pick up where others have left off. At number 9, entering his age 29 season in the prime of his career, he's thrown for 4,000 yards in 2 of his last 3 seasons. He's won a lot of games, 53 and 32 in his career. Do you think Dak Prescott has the potential to get up to maybe 6 or 7 or maybe even a blue chip quarterback?
I think he can get to 6 or 7. I don't know if he gets to that upper level. I think there's times when you watch Dak play, there's certain throws he misses. Like Peyton Manning never misses. Like, he never misses. Like, that's the difference between blue and red. They never miss, right? They just don't. Aaron Rodgers never misses. Like, if he's got the guy, the ball's going to be right where it has to be. I think sometimes Dak loses that through the keyhole accuracy. I love Dak. I think you can win a Super Bowl with Dak, right? I think all these guys on the red chip list you can win a Super Bowl with. I think all these guys can take their team there. And if Joe Gibbs was coaching any one of these 6, they're better than Doug Williams. They're better than, Mark Rippon. They're better than, Stan Humphries. And he won Super Bowls with all 3. So, like, for me, I think there's no doubt of that. So I think he could raise his level a little bit, to 6. I just don't see him being in that elite category.
I'd agree with that.
I mean, we'll save that elite category for Tua in the next conversation.
Tua over here just catching strays on the GM shuffle.
Well, I mean, it's just so unbelievable.
No, I'd agree with you. As a Cowboys fan, Dak Prescott to me has always felt like a very good quarterback, but that's his ceiling. I don't ever see him being a great quarterback. But like you said, you can win with a very good quarterback. But can you win, Michael, with a quarterback who is not on the red chip or blue chip list, in your opinion? Do you think you can win a Super Bowl with a guy that's off that list?
I mean, look, I just said, but you got to be a head coach that understands how to win the game in 3 dimensions: offense, defense, and the kicking game. You got to play complementary football. Like, you've got to play. Do I think Mac Jones will ever be a blue chip? Probably not. Do I think he can get the red chip? Maybe. Do I think he can get there? Do I think that, when you look at, like, I think Matt Ryan was never a blue chip player, but he was a red chip player. Mm-hmm. I think you can get there, but you've got to manage him. Parcells is so good at seeing the big picture that, what he was so good at doing was understanding how to take that guy who's not a red chip and make him look like a red chip, right? So how do you do that? So you do that by building the scheme. Like he would say all the time, like, there's only 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the league you don't have to manage. Like, you don't have to manage these guys. In fact, he did it so well, I think it takes people's view of Phil Simms from being a really good player away, because they managed Phil, not because they had to. They just built the offense around Phil, so it made Phil look like he wasn't as great as he was. It kind of hurt his probably Hall of Fame career chances. Really, it did, because Phil was as talented. He could run, could throw the ball. I mean, he did everything. But because the way they managed the game with him, he didn't look like an elite player when he probably had elite talent. And I think that's what you have to do. I mean, look, Garoppolo, I don't think is ever going to be a blue or red chip, and he got the 49ers there. Well, they won with defense. No, they won in a 3-dimensional way. That's how they got there. Look, I don't think Joe Burrow, Femi, was a red chip player in the playoffs last year. I really don't. You could argue all you want with me on that. I don't think he was. I thought he took dumb sacks, but McPherson bailed him out. He took sacks that a high school kid shouldn't take. Like, if you're a high school coach, a college coach, listening to this podcast, when you walk into your quarterback room, you have to have a board up there that basically shows where you can't take a sack on the field. I mean, the TV should do it for you, too. Like, during the game, they should have a graphic. You know how we go in the red zone? Oh, yep. We got Scott Hansen coming up this week. Although I've detoured Scott Hansen. I've detoured him. I got a detour build on that. I'll get to that later. But anyway, so, where you go in there, you can't take a sack here because it costs us points, right? Yeah. The quarterbacks have to know that. They have to see it every single day. I can't take a sack here. Can't take a sack here. Well, he took sacks in places you can't take them. And yet McPherson came out and just busted it right through. Had he taken those sacks and McPherson missed the kick, we'd be having a whole different conversation with Joe Burrow right now.
That Titans game comes to mind. The 9 sacks that he took in that game, somehow they were able to survive and win.
I was slamming. He kept them in the game, but McPherson bailed him out.
Yeah. As somebody who had a bet on the Titans, I thought those sacks would mean something at the end of the game in terms of the result.
So did I.
But McPherson ends up punching it through the uprights and breaking my heart back in January. But that's neither here nor there. Where we are, we've discussed the red chips. And just to recap them, Kirk Cousins, number 10, Dak Prescott, number 9, Derek Carr, number 8, Matthew Stafford, 7, and Joe Burrow, 6. Thanks for watching the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi. And for more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to VSiN Live and the GM Shuffle podcast with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN, wherever you get your podcasts.